So before I talk, I'm going to take a picture of you because I like taking pictures. I was going to do a pano. That's right. Here we go. It's nice to see all these faces. Thank you. Thank you for being in church today. Okay. I'm looking at the reading, not my sermon. I like that line. The true history of American democracy is that it's never finished. I love that. On this Sunday before Election Day, we gather to explore the profound implications of democracy, not just in our institutions and elections, but within our hearts and our lives. As Walt Whitman poignantly reminded us in the centering thought, democracy is not merely a political construct. It thrives in our interactions, in our beliefs, in our values that we embody daily. Democracy is a living, breathing expression of our interconnectedness. Our fifth UU principle also calls us to affirm and promote the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and within society writ large. I hope you recognize today that you've already followed this UU principle for most of your life in every action and reaction. I got writer's cramp this election, as I imagine some of you did too. I wrote thousands of postcards to swing states encouraging registered voters to exercise their right to vote. I would write, "Thank you for being a registered voter. Please make a plan to vote. We need every person to vote if a free and fair election is to be a reality." Sometimes with a variation like, "I hope this postcard finds you well," just so I could keep it interesting. Thousands of unsuspecting people received a postcard with my signature asking them to vote. I will have no way of knowing if my letters to Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona will make any difference at all. But it felt good to write them. It felt good to say, "I will not tell you who to vote for. Please vote." Because I believe in the democratic process. I think that the collective mind of the majority always makes a better decision than any minority. As we look upon the November 5th with uncertainty, we must ask ourselves, how do we preserve and cultivate this democracy in our hearts? How do we embrace the struggle to keep encouraging a world based on freedom, justice, and equity for all in the face of hatred and untruths? To begin with, equity, I say, instead of equality for all, because the distinction between equity and equality is dramatic in social justice and policymaking. Equality means treating everyone exactly the same and providing them with the same resources and opportunities regardless of their circumstances. Equity, however, involves recognizing that individuals have different needs. It aims to distribute resources and opportunities in a way that addresses those differences, and the goal is to achieve fair outcomes for everyone, make sure everyone has an equal opportunity. Equity recognizes systemic inequality and seeks to level the playing field. This approach is often seen more effective in addressing social disparities and achieving true liberty for all. Some politicians call this striving towards equity a progressive idea. while others call it socialist. But I digress. Our exploration today begins by examining the essence of democracy through the insightful words of Frederick Douglass. Douglass clearly articulated that freedom with equity requires struggle. It is not merely the absence of tyranny, but the presence of active engagement. He said, "Those who profess to favor freedom yet deprecate agitation are people who want crops without plowing up the ground." When we embrace democracy, we start by recognizing that it is an active and dynamic process, not an end goal. It requires commitment to change and often discomfort. Long after any election cycle, no matter who is elected. In the spirit of Douglass, we must embrace agitation, not for the sake of chaos, as the chaotic storming of the Capitol on January 6, 2021 did, but as a means of expressing dissent, as the rise of the Occupy movement did after Obama was elected president, or the many million women marches. Debate, discussion, and even protest can enrich the soil of democracy. They can express our questions about the status quo. They can demand justice when we see injustice. Democracy is only resilient when nurtured by passionately engaged citizens who refuse to accept tyranny and hold the goal of democracy for all in their hearts. The agitation necessary for democracy often arises from a deep-seated desire for change, a response to the anhedonia that can permeate a society when citizens feel disconnected from their political system. This sense of emotional numbness can fuel protests and movements as people seek to reclaim agency and restore a sense of purpose in their governance. And I think that's what we've been seeing. How much better, though, for our democracy when we agitate from a place of striving for things to improve instead of from a place of numbness or from things not going the way we want them to go. Advocacy for things to get better with agitation is not merely a disruption, but a vital force that invigorates democratic engagement, compelling individuals to voice not frustration, but mostly aspiration. By confronting the apathy bred by stressful campaigns and overzealous fundraising, communities can ignite active participation and the relentless pursuit for more just, more equitable society. Tracing the evolution of American democracy reveals a story that is still being written and is not bound by race or religion or hierarchical privilege. Heather Cox Richardson reminds us that the true story and the true history of American democracy is never, ever finished. We're still writing it. If you're one of those people who keep debating politics long after the presidential election, then you already have democracy in your heart. The founding fathers aspired to create a nation that reflected democratic ideals, but faced considerable opposition. In the 1850s, a reactionary minority sought to redefine democracy to fit their narrow interests, ultimately perverting its definition. This pivotal moment in our history is a stark reminder that democracy can never be taken for granted. It requires vigilance and active participation to ensure that the power remains in the hands of the many rather than the few. Today, several organizations across the U.S. are passionately working to safeguard these ideals. The program Take No Labels tries to shift the tide of partisan politics by combining grassroots activism with strategic lobbying to champion bipartisan solutions. Similarly, the United America Institute fosters nonpartisan civic engagement and empowers citizens to participate actively in their democratic process. And they do cutting-edge research, exploring the roots of political polarization, getting involved with groups that pave the way for more inclusive, engaged democracy is a great way to instill democracy in your heart. If you wrote letters or postcards or made phone calls for this election, it likely came from one of these organizations. And you already have democracy in your heart. True democracy transcends political engagement. It demands that we understand our neighbors and appreciate their stories and honor their perspectives. Every conversation you have that is rooted in empathy strengthens the democratic process and the democratic fabric of our society. Even when we miss the mark, even when we argue, when we regroup and try to be more empathetic the next time, we are living our democratic principles in this world because democracy is a dynamic, evolving process with many steps forward and many steps back. If you haven't gotten into an argument with a more conservative neighbor or a family member during this election, but if you've regrouped and tried to keep your relationship despite your differences, well, you are living a living, breathing seed of democracy. Half of my family of origin supports a conservative, I sometimes think authoritarian government. I cannot control the minds and votes of those I love in my family. How can I control the outcome of any election? I believe a large part of keeping the ideal of democracy in our hearts is realizing that democracy isn't something we even want to control. Everyone has to accept that they are going to disagree from time to time. On November 11th, 1947, Winston Churchill said in the House of Commons, "Many forms of government have been tried and will be tried in this world of sin and woe. No one pretends that democracy is perfect or all-wise. Indeed, it has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all those other forms of government that have been tried from time to time. When we understand that democracy is messy, that it is the worst form of government except for all the others, and that we will make mistakes and have to try and try again, then we will hold the true nature of democracy in our hearts. As I see it, one of the messiest parts of this election has been the constant texts that I've received from each political candidate asking for money. Over time, the incessant warnings of doom and gloom have left me feeling pretty anxious. I always wonder if my money is going to go to the right place, or if the little that I can contribute will make any difference at all. I want to help, but I need clarification. on all the requests, and it leaves me wondering if my money will make any difference whatsoever. A friend recently told me about Oath the Vote, which Brian Derrick started. Oath the Vote is a nonpartisan think tank focused on voter empowerment. Oath emphasizes transparency and voter education. The money goes towards strengthening democracy itself rather than partisan agendas. Making educated decisions about how to vote with our dollars in every election is part of holding democracy in our hearts. In fact, even the ways we vote with our dollars in all the spheres of our lives is part of living with democracy in our hearts, including things like the alternative gift market or buying fair trade. Understanding our history through both triumphs and failures equips us with knowledge needed to appreciate democracy's fragile yet powerful nature. As a liberal religious community, we must foster spaces for learning and dialogue and reflection on meanings of justice and equality. We must practice open and honest debate that's necessary for a free and flourishing democracy. Even every congregational discussion you have where people can express differences of opinion is part of our democracy and living our democracy. Even programs like Link, every opportunity to take on another perspective. Well, anytime you try to listen to someone else's idea, that's living with democracy in your heart. True democracy demands inclusivity, compassion, and respect for diversity of opinions. We live in a complicated world where truth has become a relative word. To keep democracy in our hearts, we cannot become cynical. When I really think about it, I realize that our transcendentalist forebearers, Ralph Waldo Emerson and Margaret Fuller, challenged traditional ideas of truth in their time by emphasizing individual experience and inner spirituality over established doctrines. They argued that truth is not a fixed external entity, but rather a personal journey, discoverable through nature and intuition and personal insight. This shift from dogmas encouraged a view of truth as fluid and intensely individual, dismantling the notion of universal truth and promoting self-reliance, subjective understanding, and continuous personal growth as paths to spiritual and moral insight. While I'll be the first to remind you that liberal religion and liberal politics are two very different things, this dismantling of truth was something I once celebrated and now feel has gone a little bit awry in our political candidates, especially the ones I disagree with. I realize that this does not hold democracy in my heart. I realize it is not about what is true or not. It's about how we keep the river running toward the truth we want to make real. Democracy, much like alluvium deposited in rivers over time, thrives on contributions of diverse voices and ideas, enriching the political landscape. Just as alluvium nourishes the soil, fostering growth and sustainability, a vibrant democracy is sustained by active participation of its citizens over time, each bringing their unique perspectives and experiences to the forefront. This collective engagement and contribution ensures that the system remains adaptable and resilient and capable of evolving in response to changing needs of society. Ultimately, the spirit of democracy is formed by the deposits made by generations of active citizens, with ever-evolving inclusivity and the continuous flow of new ideas to foster and nourish a flourishing community. When you are animated by different ideas from your own and enjoy a passionate, respectful debate, you have democracy enshrined in your heart. Let us be the stewards of freedom, equity, and justice, walking in solidarity with those who struggle for equity and have struggled for equity for generations. Together, we can rewrite the narrative of democracy in America, crafting a story that is inclusive and compassionate and responsive to the needs of all people, even those we disagree with, even if we cannot elect who we believe will be the best president. In fact, when democracy is enshrined in our hearts, we know that presidents come and go, but democracy endures whenever someone is still fighting for liberty and justice and equity for all. Or in Walt Whitman's words, let us continue to embody the spirit of democracy through our actions, even our everyday actions, standing firm against oppression and working tirelessly for this weary yet wonderful world.